They sent us a bill for our own son. Commander Eva Rostova watched the demand crawl across the main screen of the Aurora court. It was written in flawless, sterile Federation standard, a language of trade and treaties. But the message itself was pure piracy, dressed in the robes of a contract. She stood on the command deck, a place of quiet order and filtered light, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in the system beyond. The ship, a vessel of the human diplomatic corps, was here to observe the Lyran system's final approach to warp capability. Instead, they had arrived to find it under siege by legalese. The stakes were absolute, the soul of a new species, and the precedent that would echo through this quadrant for centuries. A public inquiry was not just an option, it was the only weapon she had. A civilian on Lyra, a world now perpetually twilight, pulled her thermal cloak tighter. Kaylin was a sky painter, her medium the shifting auroras of her planet's upper atmosphere. For 3 rotations, a great dark lens had capped her world, a marvel of engineering that had saved them all from a sun rage. Now the saviors, the Cathar, demanded their price. The air was growing colder. The broadcasts spoke of a gratitude tithe, a debt so vast it could only be paid in generations of servitude. Her canvases, once vibrant with cosmic light, now showed only a flat, dead black. Rostova's first officer, Yorick, moved to her side, his jaw tight. "It's a shakedown, Commander. A protection racket on a planetary scale." He gestured to the Cathar vessel, a brutalist spike of obsidian metal hanging in high orbit over the blue-white world of Lyra. "They block a stellar flare, then present a bill for the planet's entire future output. It's monstrous. It's legal." Rostova corrected her voice low and even. "Or rather, it occupies a space where the law is silent. That's where they operate." The ship's mind, Argus, chimed in its voice, a calm, synthesized baritone emanating from the air itself. "Commander, my analysis of Cathar precedents is complete. Their method is consistent. They locate a pre-warp civilization facing a natural disaster, provide unsolicited aid of a scale the locals cannot refuse, and then leverage the debt of gratitude into a binding servitude contract. The contracts are always ironclad. They had weaponized gratitude." "What do the Lyrans say?" Rostova asked, turning to her communications specialist, Lena. The young officer looked pale. "They are terrified, Commander. They signed. The Cathar showed them projections of the flare's impact. Extinction level. What choice did they have? Now the Cathar are demanding the first payment, the fitting of obligation collars on 1/10 of the population." Yorick's fist clenched. "Collars. They call enslavement a collar of obligation." Rostova's eyes narrowed, fixed on the predatory ship on the screen. The law was a shield, not a cage. She would have to remind them. "Yorick, I want tactical scenarios, but hold all deployments. Lena, open a channel to the Cathar Proctor. Use formal diplomatic protocols. We are going to ask them to explain their accounting." Argus spoke again, a note of caution in its perfect tone. "Commander, a direct challenge may be interpreted as interference. The Cathar have a valid signed contract under the Free Commerce Accords. They have a signature obtained under duress." Rostova countered, her voice hardening. "They presented a choice between extinction and servitude. That is not a choice. It is coercion, and we are going to prove it in open court." A ledger remembers what a collar forgets. The connection chimed. A new face filled the screen, reptilian and ancient. Its eyes, vertical slits of amber, blinked slowly. The creature wore ornate, flowing robes, and the air around it seemed to shimmer with a field of personal authority. Below the image, the text identified him Proctor Valgus of the Cathar Stewardship. "Commander Rostova, Valgus began, his voice a smooth, oily purr. An unexpected pleasure. We had not anticipated a visit from the diplomatic corps. Have you come to admire our humanitarian work? Rostova met his gaze without flinching. Proctor, I have come to review the terms of your assistance to the Lyraean people. Your gratitude tithe appears disproportionate to the service rendered. Valgus gave a slow, deliberate smile, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Disproportionate, Commander. We saved a species. What is the appropriate price for a world? For a culture? For every life that continues to draw breath on that planet? We believe a tithe of their productivity for a few millennia is a bargain. He spread his three-fingered hands in a gesture of magnanimity. Justice is a function of mathematics, Rostova thought. And this equation didn't balance. Proctor, the cradle net, accord section. 7 Article 4 are very clear. Any aid rendered to a pre-warp society must not create a state of permanent dependency. Your tithe does exactly that. The proctor's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. An interesting interpretation, Commander. However, the Accords also respect the sanctity of a freely signed contract. The Lyraean leadership was most grateful. We have it on record. A flicker of movement on the planet's surface caught Rostova's eye. On the tactical display, Argus highlighted a minute energy fluctuation from the massive shield surrounding Lyra. The planet's surface temperature dropped by a fraction of a degree. It was a subtle, terrifying threat. A reminder of who held the planet's life in their hands. This was the first escalation. They were demonstrating their leverage. Proctor, Rostova said, her voice dropping to a steely calm. You are required by interstellar law to provide a full public accounting of your expenses in this humanitarian effort. I am formally requesting that accounting now. We will audit your ledger. Valgus's eyes narrowed. The pretense of civility was thinning. Our ledgers are our own affair, Commander. A matter of internal stewardship accounting. Not when you are billing a protected cradle world for its own survival, Rostova shot back. Provide the accounting, Proctor, or I will invoke a formal inquiry of method before the Star Court. Your entire business model will be put on trial for every listening race in this sector to witness. A deep silence hung on the bridge. Rostova had drawn the line. She was forcing his hand, moving the battle from a private negotiation to a public stage. She was turning their own weapon, the law, against them. A court must have a defendant, and she had just nominated him. On Lyra, the sky painter, Kaelin felt the sudden chill. She saw the frost creeping across her window, a mirror of the cold dread in her heart. But then a new light appeared in the dark sky. A tiny, brilliant spark. A ship that was not Cathar. For the first time in days, she felt a sliver of warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. Hope. Proctor Valgus stared out from the screen for a long moment. The shimmering field around him pulsed once, a sign of agitation. An inquiry, he hissed. The purr gone from his voice. You would challenge the very principle of gratitude. You would teach younger races that salvation comes without a cost. Salvation is not a subscription service, Rostova replied flatly. And we teach by numbers, not by collars. Send us the data, Proctor. The whole sector is watching now. The transmission ended abruptly. Yorick let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He's not going to just roll over. No, Rostova agreed. He's going to fight. But he's going to fight on our terms, in the light. She turned to the ship's mind. Argus, begin a deep spectrum analysis of the star. I want to know everything about that solar flare. Its origin, its composition, its energy curve. Everything. An honest son does not send a bill. Already underway, Commander Quoth, the AI replied. Initial readings show anomalies. The flare's progression was not consistent with standard models of this star type. Rostova nodded slowly. A seed of a darker suspicion was taking root in her mind. What if the Cathar hadn't just been waiting for a disaster? What if they had manufactured it? The thought was chilling, but it fit their predatory model perfectly. Create the crisis, sell the cure, collect the debt in perpetuity. It was a business plan of unimaginable evil. The first data packet from the Cathar arrived. It was, as expected, a masterpiece of obfuscation. The ledger was a labyrinth of inflated costs, esoteric service charges, and compounding interest calculations that spiraled into astronomical figures. Risk amortization, benevolence overhead, cultural preservation licensing. It was the vocabulary of a loan shark applied on a cosmic scale. "They're burying us in paperwork," Lena said, her fingers flying across her console as she tried to parse the data stream. "These numbers are meaningless. They've listed gravitational stabilization at a cost equivalent to the output of a small star for a decade." "The numbers aren't meant to be understood," Jorik grumbled. "They're meant to intimidate, to make the debt look so vast that no one would dare challenge it." "But a number, no matter how large, can be counted," Rostova said, her eyes scanning the readouts. "And every number has a source. Argus isolate every line item related to direct energy expenditure. Ignore the administrative surcharges. I want to know what it actually cost them to power that shield." The law had to be built on truth, and the truth always started with simple math. "Working, Commander," Argus confirmed, cross-referencing their stated expenditures with my own sensor logs of their vessel's energy output. There are discrepancies." Of course there were. This was the opening Rostova needed. The Cathar had lied. Not just with words, but with their ledger. And in the courts of the galaxy, a fraudulent ledger was a confession. Her gamble was paying off. She had forced them to speak their method, and their first words were a lie. A priority message alert blinked on Lena's console. "Commander, it's a counterfiling from the Cathar. They're lodging a formal complaint with the Sector Tribunal. They accuse us of tortious interference with a binding commercial agreement." Yorick swore under his breath. "So that's their move. They're trying to tie us up in legal knots, drown us in countersuits until we back off." This was the second escalation. The Cathar were not just defending. They were attacking using the law as a barrage weapon. "They're establishing a pretext," Rostova corrected him, her gaze unwavering. "If this escalates to a physical confrontation, they'll claim we were the aggressors illegally interfering with their lawful business. They are building a case for self-defense." They were preparing for a war and planning to have the law on their side before the first shot was fired. "They're also broadcasting Commander Xen," Lena added, bringing up another window. "Propaganda. Edited clips of the Lyraean leaders thanking Proctor Valgus. Footage of their children playing under the protective glow of the Cathar shield. They're painting us as villains trying to undo a great humanitarian act." Rostova watched the carefully curated images. The Lyraeans looked relieved, grateful, unaware of the price tag attached to their salvation. The Cathar were not just masters of law, they were masters of narrative. They were winning the public relations war before the inquiry had even begun. "They control the narrative because they control the shield," Rostova murmured. "The Lyraeans can't speak freely while their atmosphere is being held hostage." She looked at the tactical map at the single human ship facing the obsidian Cathar vessel. They were outmatched in firepower, outmaneuvered in propaganda. But they had one thing the Cathar didn't: the truth. Lena, can you get a secure, low-bandwidth channel to the Lyran surface, something the Cathar won't immediately detect? It's risky, Commander. They're monitoring all high-level transmissions. But I could try to piggyback a signal on a natural neutrino emission from the star. It would be slow, but it should be invisible. Do it, Rostova ordered. I need to talk to someone on the ground. Not the leaders who signed the contract under duress. Someone ordinary. She thought of the sky painter, a profession that existed only on a world with a sky to see. Find me an artist, Lena. Find me someone who remembers what the sun felt like. A system must be judged by what it creates. Argus chose that moment to interrupt its synthesized voice, cutting through the tension on the bridge. Commander, my analysis of the stellar flare is conclusive. The event was artificially induced. The bridge went silent. The suspicion was now a certainty. The air crackled with the enormity of the revelation. The flare originated from a single impossibly small point on the star's chromosphere, Argus continued. Its energy signature contains trace elements of a hyper-dense alloy used exclusively in Cathar gravity manipulation technology. They fired a projectile into the star. They created the storm they claimed to have saved the Lyrians from. Yorick stared at the screen, his face a mask of cold fury. They didn't find a disaster. They made one. This changed everything. This wasn't just predatory lending. It was attempted genocide for profit. It was the ultimate crime. But it also presented a new problem: how to prove it. Do we have definitive proof, Argus Moshon? Rostova asked, her mind racing. Something that would stand up in a formal inquiry. The evidence is circumstantial but computationally undeniable, the AI replied. The gravimetric echoes of the projectile's launch are still faintly detectable, but they are rapidly degrading. The Cathar will undoubtedly claim they are sensor ghosts or natural phenomena. To be legally binding, the evidence would require independent verification, which they had no way of getting without revealing their hand. They were in a legal paradox. They held the truth, but a truth they couldn't use without the Cathar simply denying it and erasing the faint evidence. They needed a confession. They needed the Cathar to admit it themselves. Rostova paced the command deck. Her path was a short, straight line between the tactical display and the main view screen showing the captive world. They had the motive, they had the means, but the evidence was fading. The public inquiry was their only venue, but if they made the accusation and failed to prove it, their own credibility would be shattered, and the Lyrians would be lost for good. She had to architect a confession. Proctor Valgus thinks this is a game of accounting, she said, thinking aloud. He's prepared to argue about numbers. He's not prepared for us to question the very nature of the storm itself. She stopped, her eyes gleaming with a new dangerous idea. We're not going to accuse him. We're going to make him brag. Yorick looked at her confused. Brag about starting a stellar flare. No, Rostova said. He's going to brag about his technology, about his power. She turned to Lena. Is that secure channel to the surface open yet? It is, Commander. I have a connection. A sky painter named Kalin. She's agreed to speak with you. Patch her through to my ready room, Rostova commanded. Yorick, you have the bridge. Keep the Cathar busy with procedural questions about their fraudulent ledger. Send them endless queries. Drown them in the paperwork they tried to drown us in. Buy me time. Rostova walked into her ready room, the door hissing shut behind her. The face that appeared on her private screen was thin and etched with worry, but the eyes were bright and intelligent. Kalin, Rostova began, her voice softening. I am Commander Eva Rostova of the Aurora Court. I need you to tell me about your son. An hour later, Rostova returned to the bridge. Her face was set like stone. In her hand, she held a small data chip. Jorik and Lena looked at her expectantly. "The inquiry starts in 30 minutes, Rostova announced. "The sector tribunal has granted our petition citing the Cathar's non-cooperation on the ledger. Proctor Valgus has been compelled to attend." She looked around the bridge at her small, determined crew. "He believes he's coming to a debate about finance. He is about to walk into a trial for a crime he doesn't even know we've discovered." The cost of their salvation was a lie. The public inquiry convened not in a physical room, but in the shared, non-physical space of the Galactic comms network. It was a courtroom of light and data witnessed by any ship or station that chose to tune in. The icon for the Aurora Court was a simple silver scale. The Cathar icon was an ornate gilded contract. Presiding was a neutral adjudicator AI from the sector tribunal, its presence represented by a sphere of pure white light. Proctor Valgus appeared, his image projected in perfect fidelity. He looked smug, confident. He began by laying out his case with practiced ease. He spoke of the Cathar's long history of stewardship, of their solemn duty to guide younger races. He presented the dramatic sensor readings of the solar flare, a wall of fire that would have scoured Lyra clean. And he presented the contract signed and sealed by the Lyraean elders. "A simple act of kindness," Valgus concluded, his voice resonating with false sincerity. "A rescue. And for this, we ask only a token of gratitude, a contribution to our continued efforts to safeguard life across the galaxy." Yet Commander Rostova of the Terran vessel Aurora Court calls this predatory. She seeks to teach the Lyraeans the most dangerous lesson of all, that they are entitled to salvation without responsibility. It was a masterful performance. He had framed humanity as arrogant interlopers undermining the natural order of gratitude and debt. The adjudicator AI turned its attention to Rostova. "Commander, your response." Rostova's image remained calm, her posture radiating a quiet authority. "I thank the proctor for his presentation. We do not dispute that the Lyraeans were in danger, nor do we dispute that the Cathar provided a shield. What we dispute," she said, her voice becoming sharp and precise, "is the accounting." She began her assault not with accusations, but with numbers. With Argus as her witness, she projected a simplified version of the Cathar's ledger into the inquiry space for all to see, a mirror of their own greed. "Proctor, your ledger claims the deployment of the shield emitters cost 7 trillion credits. Yet our sensor logs show your ship's energy expenditure during that period was consistent with routine orbital maneuvers. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Valgus waved a dismissive hand. "Pre-deployment costs, research and development, the decades of work that went into creating such life-saving technology. The cost is not merely in the flipping of a switch, Commander." "I see," Rostova said. "So the Lyraeans are not just paying for their shield. They are funding your entire corporate research division." The point landed. A few observing vessels flickered their running lights in acknowledgement. Rostova pressed on, chipping away at the fraudulent numbers one by one. She questioned the risk multipliers, the personnel hardship bonuses, the intellectual property licensing fees. With each question, she forced Valgus to invent more elaborate justifications, to spin a more complex web of lies. He was so focused on defending his fraudulent accounting that he didn't see the real trap being laid. A debt paid in truth is no debt at all. Finally, after nearly an hour of this relentless financial dissection, Rostova paused. She let the silence hang in the virtual space. "Proctor," she said, her tone shifting from prosecutorial to one of academic curiosity. I must confess your technology is impressive. Truly. To deploy a planetary shield of this magnitude with such speed and precision in response to such an unpredictable solar event, it's a remarkable feat of engineering. Valgus preened, falling into the trap head first. It is, Commander. The Cathar stewardship has spent millennia mastering the fundamental forces. We do not merely predict the weather of stars. We understand it. Indeed, Rostova said, her voice smooth as silk. I was particularly struck by the shield's efficiency. To be able to nullify a coronal mass ejection of that specific energetic frequency while allowing other forms of light and radiation to pass through, it suggests the shield was tuned specifically for that flare. Valgus's amber eyes gleamed with pride. He was boasting now, just as she had hoped. Of course, our science is precise. We analyzed the flare's composition in the microseconds before it erupted and calibrated the shield accordingly. A crude brute force shield would have plunged the planet into a permanent ice age. Ours is a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. The audience was captivated. This was no longer a dry financial hearing. It was a display of technological prowess. Rostova leaned forward slightly, her digital avatar mimicking the motion. To have that level of analytical and predictive power, to be able to anticipate the exact nature of a flare before it even fully forms, it's almost as if you knew it was coming. Valgus's smug expression didn't waver. As I said, Commander, we understand the language of stars. Then perhaps you can explain this, Rostova said. She gestured, and a new piece of evidence appeared in the inquiry space. It was not a chart or a graph. It was a work of art, a breathtakingly beautiful image of the Lyroan sun painted by Kalin. It showed the sun as it had appeared in the days before the flare, and on its surface was a tiny dark spot, a sunspot that did not match any known stellar phenomena. This is a painting, Valgus sneered. From one of the primitives. What is this supposed to prove? This is a pre-contact record, Rostova corrected him, her voice ringing with authority. Made by an artist who has chronicled the face of her son for 50 years. She noticed this anomaly. A spot that was, in her words, too cold, too sharp. She painted it because it was wrong. Rostova then superimposed Argus's sensor data over the painting. The dark, wrong spot on the canvas lined up perfectly with the calculated impact point of the Cathar projectile. The odds of a natural flare originating from this exact point, a point with no prior solar activity, are statistically zero, Rostova stated, her voice like ice. The odds of it matching the unique energy signature of your gravity manipulation technology are also zero. The odds of both happening at the same time. She left the sentence unfinished. Valgus stared at the image. The artist's rendering the cold data the undeniable match. The trap had sprung. For the first time, a flicker of panic appeared in his ancient eyes. He had been so busy defending the price of the cure, he hadn't realized he was being tried for causing the disease. The adjudicator AI's white sphere seemed to pulse with intensity. Proctor Valgus, the inquiry requires you to address this evidence. Valgus opened his mouth, but for a moment, no sound came out. The oily confidence was gone, replaced by a venomous rage. This is a fabrication, a conspiracy between a deluded primitive and a meddling, hypocritical human. You have no proof. But you do, Rostova said quietly. Your own pride is the proof. You just told this entire inquiry that your technology was precise enough to analyze and counter a flare in microseconds. A flare you claim was a surprise. You cannot have it both ways, Proctor. Either you are lying about your technology's capabilities, in which case your entire service ledger is fraudulent, or you are telling the truth, in which case you had foreknowledge of the event. She paused, letting the logic corner him. So tell the court proctor, which is it? Are you a liar? Are you something much, much worse? A public ledger demands a public answer. The silence stretched thick and damning. Valgus was trapped between two confessions. His business model was built on the lie of his benevolence, but his pride was built on the truth of his power. Rostova had forced him to choose which one he would sacrifice. He had spent so long hiding behind the complexity of law that he was unprepared for the simplicity of a direct question. The Cathar proctor looked from Rostova's unwavering image to the damning evidence still glowing in the center of the virtual court. He saw the silent watching icons of dozens of other ships and species, a jury of his potential future victims. His entire predatory enterprise was balanced on the edge of a knife. The inquiry was no longer about a single planet's debt. It had become a trial for the soul of the Cathar stewardship itself. His reptilian face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You have no idea what you have done, human," he hissed, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. The broadcast from his end began to degrade, a wave of powerful, angry static washing over the inquiry. It was a blatant attempt at disruption, an act of contempt against the court itself. Argus's calm voice cut through the noise on the Aurora Court's bridge. "Commander, the Cathar vessel is powering its weapons systems." Jorik was already at his station. "Shields are up. They're targeting us." The second escalation had just been trumped by the third. The legal battle was about to become a physical one. The Cathar, seeing their legal fiction collapsing, were resorting to the final, oldest argument, brute force. "Adjudicator," Rostova said, her voice remaining perfectly level despite the tactical alerts now screaming across her bridge. "Let the record show that in response to a direct question under the authority of this public inquiry, the Cathar have threatened lethal force. They answer evidence with violence." The white sphere of the adjudicator pulsed brightly. "The record so notes, Commander. The actions of the Cathar stewardship are now a matter of public testimony and tribunal record." On the main screen, the obsidian spike of the Cathar ship began to glow with malevolent energy. A weapon was charging, aimed directly at the heart of the Aurora Court. The time for words was over. The mirror of justice had shown the Cathar their true face, and they had chosen to smash it rather than look away. Rostova turned to her tactical officer. "Jorik," she said, her voice devoid of any fear, filled only with a cold, hard resolve. "You have the con." Yorik's hands flew over the tactical console, his knuckles white. "Energy signature is off the charts, Commander. It's a plasma lance. It will gut us." On the main screen, the Cathar ship was a predator gathering its strength, a lance of incandescent rage forming at its prow. The ship was no longer a vessel of law. It was an executioner's axe. The inquiry's observers held their collective digital breath. "Configure mirror shield's full front aspect," Rostova commanded, her voice cutting through the rising tension. "Lena, keep the inquiry channel open and recording. Prioritize all data to the adjudicator. Argus, stand by to draft an invoice." Jorik hesitated for a split second, his training screaming at him to fire back, to raise countermeasure fields, to do anything other than just sit here and take a killing blow. "Commander, mirror configuration won't stop that level of penetration. It's a reflective protocol, not a hardened defense." "I am aware," Rostova said. Her eyes locked on the enemy ship. "Do it, Jorik." He complied, his jaw tight with grim acceptance. On the ship's schematic, the layered shields collapsed, their defensive matrices reforming into a single, impossibly smooth, silvered surface. It was a beautiful, suicidal maneuver. The Aurora Court had just turned itself into a perfect target. A law that cannot be enforced is merely a suggestion. The Cathar fired. A torrent of white-hot plasma, a river of pure destruction, crossed the void in an instant. It struck the Aurora Court, not with a bang, but with a sound like a colossal tuning fork being struck. The entire ship screamed a high-frequency vibration that shook every plate and conduit. Lights shattered on the bridge. A secondary power conduit behind Lena's station exploded in a shower of brilliant, harmless sparks, a safety system pushed to its absolute limit. The cost of standing your ground is always paid in full. But the ship held. The plasma did not pierce the hull. Instead, it splashed against the mirror shield, spreading across its surface like liquid light. The shield glowed first white, then cherry red, then a blinding, ferocious blue as it absorbed the colossal energy dump. The ship's inertial dampeners whined, struggling to compensate for the raw, kinetic impact. Yorick felt his teeth rattle in his skull. Energy absorption at 112% of shield capacity. Argus announced, its voice unnervingly calm amidst the chaos. Recalibrating for discharge. Invoice drafted and appended. Discharge, Yorick managed to ask, staring at his console. We don't have a weapon charged. We do now, Rostova said. From the face of the mirror shield, the stored energy did not fire back as a lance. It erupted in a perfectly controlled omnidirectional wave, not of plasma, but of raw data and light. It was not an attack. It was a statement. The wave washed over the Cathar vessel harmlessly. Embedded within it, however, was a message broadcast on all frequencies and submitted directly into the public inquiry as evidence. It was a bill. On the inquiry's main display, next to the Cathar's original demand for the Lyran system, a new document appeared. It was an invoice from the Terran vessel Aurora Court to the Cathar stewardship. The line item was simple: unsolicited transfer of surplus energy. The price was calculated to the last credit using the exact inflated valuation for energy production that Proctor Valgus had listed in his own fraudulent ledger for Lyra. They had billed the Cathar for the energy of their own attack, Silence. The entire sector-wide audience was stunned into a profound, absolute quiet. This was not warfare. This was accountancy as a martial art. Rostova had not returned fire. She had returned a cost. She had taken their weapon, their methodology, their predatory numbers, and mirrored it back at them. The attack had not been an act of war. It had been a commercial transaction, and the Cathar had just made a very, very poor trade. A ledger is the final arbiter of truth. Proctor Valgus's projected image in the inquiry flickered wildly. The oily superiority was gone, burned away by pure, undiluted fury and public humiliation. He had been beaten not by force of arms, but by his own price list. "This is a mockery!" he shrieked, his voice distorted with rage and static. "A trick, an insult to the sanctity of—" Proctor Valgus Otong. The adjudicator AI interrupted, its white light glowing with cold authority. Your attack on a vessel participating in a legal inquiry has been recorded. Your failure to destroy it has been recorded. The subsequent invoice based on your own submitted fee schedule has been accepted into the record. You have provided the court with a clear, unambiguous demonstration of your operational methods. Violence followed by exorbitant billing. On Lyra, the sky painter Kaylin had watched the distant flash of the battle through her small, frosted window. She saw the lance of light, the answering pulse. She did not understand the details, but she understood the meaning. The small, bright spark of hope was fighting back, and it was still there. Valgus knew he had lost. The legal argument was in ashes. The public relations battle was a catastrophe. His authority was shattered. But he still had one card left to play the hostage. "You think you have one human," he spat, his image stabilizing. "The inquiry is a sham. Your accounting tricks are meaningless. But the shield over this planet is very real, and so is its failsafe." On the tactical display, Argus flagged a new energy surge, this one from the massive Cathar installation on the surface of Lyra. "Commander, the planetary shield generator is beginning a recursive overload sequence. It is designed to detonate with the force of a tectonic weapon. He intends to shatter the planet's crust." Yorick's face went pale. "He's going to blow the planet just for spite." This was the final desperate escalation of a tyrant who had been cornered. If he couldn't own the world, he would erase it from existence. "He's not just being spiteful," Rostova realized aloud. "He's destroying the evidence. The generator contains the logs of its true energy cost. The proof that the shield was cheap to run. He's cleaning his books. A crime is not a crime if there are no witnesses left." "Can we stop it?" Lena asked, her voice tight with urgency. "A direct assault on the generator would likely accelerate the detonation," Argus stated. "The overload is being controlled from the Cathar vessel. However, the generator itself must have local control nodes. If we could access them, we might be able to initiate a shutdown." Rostova's gaze was fixed on the tactical map. The Aurora Court was damaged. Its shields were compromised from the plasma attack. They couldn't fight their way to the surface. "We can't get to it from here," she said. "But we have an asset on the ground." She turned to her comms officer. "Lena, get me Kalen. Now." The connection was re-established, the signal weak and strained. "Kalen," Rostova said, her voice urgent but calm. "The Cathar are trying to destroy your world. We need your help to stop them. The machine that projects the shield, the one they built on the Great Mesa. We need to get inside it." On Lyra, Kalen stood in her cold dwelling, the voice from the stars echoing in her ear. Fear threatened to paralyze her. She was a painter, not a soldier. But then she looked at her canvases, at the endless black skies she had been forced to paint. She thought of the son her son held hostage. The choice was not a choice at all. "Tell me what to do," she said, her own voice surprising her with its strength. What followed was a desperate, frantic race against time. Guided by Rostova and Argus, Kalen gathered a small group of her fellow Lyrians, engineers, scholars, people who knew the local terrain. They were a tiny, unarmed party moving through the twilight towards a fortress of alien technology that was counting down to doomsday. Their only weapons were a human commander's guidance, an AI's instructions, and a sky painter's courage. A planet's fate is weighed in the hearts of its people. On the bridge of the Aurora Court, the crew could only watch and wait. Yorick had diverted all available power to boosting the ship's sensors, trying to give Argus the best possible view of the generator complex. Lena relayed complex instructions from the AI to Kalen's team, translating advanced engineering concepts into simple, actionable steps. Find the conduit that hums with a low, steady tone. Follow it to a triangular junction. There should be a maintenance panel. The minutes stretched into an eternity. The energy readings from the generator climbed higher and higher. The overload was approaching its final stage. Valgus on the Inquiry Channel was now ranting a long, self-pitying tirade about the ingratitude of lesser races and the righteousness of his cause. He was broadcasting his own sociopathic manifesto to the galaxy as his final act. "We have found the panel," Kalen's voice crackled over the comm. "It is sealed. We cannot open it." "The panel is magnetically locked," Argus calculated. "It requires a localized energy pulse of a specific frequency to release. Your people do not possess the tools for that." The bridge crew slumped. They were so close. an impossible, frustrating dead end. Rostova looked at the damage reports from her own ship, the exploded conduit behind Lena's station, the safety system that had shunted the overload. An idea sparked. Lena, the power conduit that blew at your station. The emergency discharge. What was its energy frequency? Lena's eyes widened as she understood. She checked her board. A standard Terran failsafe frequency. Why, Kalen's Rostova said into the comm, her voice electric with renewed hope. Do your people have magnets, simple natural magnets, lodestones? Yes, came the confused reply. We use them for navigating in the twilight. And do you have artists who work with resonant metals, chimes, singing bowls, anything that creates a pure tone when struck? There was a pause. Yes, I have such things in my own workshop. What are you asking? Commander, I see your logic, Argus chimed in. The Cathar magnetic lock is sophisticated, but it may be vulnerable to sympathetic resonance. A powerful enough magnet struck at the correct resonant frequency could theoretically create the pulse needed to bypass the lock. It was a wild, desperate longshot, a plan that relied on Stone Age tools and artistic instruments to defeat alien high technology. Justice has a resonance of its own. On Lyra, Kalen relayed the instructions. A Lyraean who worked with resonant sculptures sprinted back to the settlement. He returned minutes later, breathless, carrying a set of finely tuned metal bowls. They placed their largest lodestone against the alien panel. Then, following the precise tonal guidance relayed by Argus through Rostova, the Lyraean artist began to strike the bowls, creating a single pure, rising tone. The sound was hauntingly beautiful in the cold, thin air. On the bridge of the Aurora Court, they watched their sensor readings. The magnetic field around the panel began to fluctuate. It's working, Jorik breathed. The tone from the bowls rose higher, clearer, a needle of pure sound. With a loud click, the panel sprang open. We are in, Kalen reported, her voice filled with a mixture of terror and triumph. The rest was a flurry of controlled chaos. With Argus guiding their hands, the Lyraeans bypassed the primary overload circuit and rerouted the generator's power into a stable internal loop. The catastrophic energy buildup began to subside. On the Aurora Court's tactical display, the angry red warning icon for the generator flickered, turned yellow, and then a calm, stable green. They had done it. The planet was safe. Proctor Valgus's rant on the inquiry channel cut off mid-sentence. His image was replaced by the view from his own ship's bridge showing the Lyran system shrinking rapidly as his vessel jumped to warp. He had fled, a coward running from the consequences of his failed atrocity. Jorik looked at the tactical screen. He's gone. Orders, Commander. Let him run. Rostova said, a deep weariness settling over her. He has nowhere to go. Every port, every station in this sector has seen the record of this inquiry. He is a pariah. His stewardship is bankrupt both morally and thanks to our invoice financially. A tyrant's final prison is his own reputation. The adjudicator AI spoke, its voice filling the silence on the bridge. The public inquiry is now concluded. The evidence is overwhelming. The Cathar stewardship is found guilty of contract fraud, reckless endangerment of a cradle world, and the willful initiation of a stellar crisis for material gain. Their commercial charters are hereby revoked. Their assets are forfeit pending restitution to all aggrieved parties, beginning with the Lyran system. The sphere of white light pulsed once brightly. The contract of gratitude tithe is declared null and void. The Lyran people are recognized as a free and sovereign species. This judgment is locked and binding. So says the Star Court. The war was over, and not a single life had been taken by human hands. But the victory was not without its price. The Aurora Court was severely damaged. The ship's main energy core had been strained to the breaking point by the mirror shield maneuver and would require a full replacement, a tangible, costly wound. Furthermore, Lena's station was a wreck. She had sustained minor plasma burns to her hands when the conduit blew a permanent, if small, scar to remind her of the day they build a sun. Rostova opened a channel to the surface one last time. Kalen's face appeared on the screen, no longer pale with fear, but flushed with victory. Behind her, other Lyrans were looking up at the sky. "The shield is still active," Kalen said. We don't know how to turn it off." "It's yours now," Rostova replied, a faint smile touching her lips. "We are transferring control to you, along with all of its schematics and operational principles. You are not just saved, you are empowered. Argus will assist your engineers in learning its function. You will never be at the mercy of your sky again." She paused. "And we will not be sending you a bill." For the first time in days, Kalen wept. They were tears not of fear, but of an emotion so profound she had no name for it. The bridge of the Aurora Court was quiet now. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only the hum of damaged systems and the deep satisfaction of a difficult job done right. Rostova walked to the forward viewport, looking down at the blue-white world they had pulled back from the brink. The vast, dark lens of the Cathar shield was still there, but it was no longer a symbol of oppression. It was a tool waiting for its rightful owners to take control. Soon, the sky painters of Lyra would have their canvas back, a canvas they now owned and understood. The small beacon on the command console that had signified their connection to the Star Court inquiry, a light that had burned with fierce intensity for hours, slowly began to cool. Its brilliant white light softened, contracting into a gentle, pulsing blue, the color of a settled verdict. The air around it seemed to lose its electric charge, the ozone smell of conflict fading into the familiar scent of recycled air and quiet duty. Justice is not about retribution. It is about restoration. We did not come here to punish the Cathar for their greed, but to restore to the Lyraeans what was stolen from them, their future. The law should not be a weapon to conquer others, but a tool to build a universe where no one needs a collar to understand the value of a helping hand. The ledger is now balanced, not with blood, but with numbers, and that is a victory that will endure. The precedent is the shield.